Hey, welcome back to the podcast. I am Justin Stacy,
I'm Nate Thomas.
Josh Matney.
and today for this episode, we are going to talk about why Star Wars is better than Star Trek.
Oh, that will not take long. Because I agree. I love Star Trek, but come on, Star Wars is my favorite. They're not remotely the same.
So, I guess coming into this, I felt like, I'm a decent Star Trek fan. I watch the new stuff. I watch the Star Trek Discovery, really enjoy it. I watch Star Trek Picard, really enjoy it. I'm like, I'm definitely a Star Trek fan. Then I watch these, and then I'm like, uh-oh. So I feel like I'm definitely going to be the villain in this thing because I'm probably going to poop all over everything tonight. Like, I went to Taco Bell, and I'm ready to explode tonight.
What a metaphor.
Man, I went PG on this one.
I mean,
a simple, all right, it would have been fine.
I also think it would have been fine to say, I didn't really like them. But hey, whatever colorful metaphor works for you, pal.
Exactly. There's a lot of toilet humor on this podcast,
Yeah.
as we've experienced from the previous one.
Sure. Yeah. Way to go.
Okay, that's enough of that. Let's get started. Sit back, relax, put your feet up as we open a bottle of pop culture.
Right.
We're gonna talk about some really cool stuff. With Josh, Nate, and I, we're gonna blow this thing up. We're gonna talk about the movies you love. And if you don't, well, that's just tough. But we're gonna talk about shows that are awesome. You'll say, whoa, when we talking about Blossom. This will be your one and only stop for everything nerdy in a bottle of pop culture.
Right.
All right. So, jumping into the meat of the discussion tonight, and I've totally ruined anybody's appetite if you're hungry, I'm going to imagine at this point. All right, so tonight we are talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan,
Yes.
and Star Trek III, The Search for Spock.
That's right.
All right, and this came up naturally last week. I don't think it was on anybody's list. I think we mentioned Star Trek as being one of our favorite things, but it wasn't on anybody's list. But we added it because we felt it was the natural progression in what we should talk about next, and there we go. So I've got a synopsis pulled up, and a plug for the site that I'm using. It is memoryalphafandom.com, and
Great site.
yeah, this is my first, I guess, exposure to it. It seems really, really good for Star Trek stuff. Do they have more than just Star Trek?
I think Memory Alpha is just Star Trek. It's based off of something in one of the new series. I can't remember the details, but like I watched Star Trek Deep Space Nine several years ago. And what I would do is I'd go to Memory Alpha after I watched an episode. I'd read the synopsis, the trivia, the continuity. And it just, for me, it was just a nice addition. You can watch the show and not use that. But for me, it was just such a nice plug for plug in the points anyway.
Yeah. Agreed. So it is basically my notes for the night.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start out with the, I guess, synopsis that's on here for each of them. So for Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, it says Admiral James T. Kirk faces his greatest challenge yet. Suffering through doubts about his place in the galaxy, he is thrust into action once more against his most bitter foe, Khan Singh, who has escaped his exile on City Alpha 5, now seeking revenge on Kirk. With a powerful new device in the wrong hands and a no-win scenario in play, the cost of victory for the Starship Enterprise may prove too high. So that is the synopsis, beautifully written. So where do we want to get started?
Well, I mean, I don't want to dumb it down, but I think of the three of us, I'm the only one who actually watched the original series. Is that right?
Yeah, I never watched the original.
I attempted years
Yeah.
ago when I got streaming. I was like, you know what? It's here. I'm going to try it. I watched about 2 episodes, and I'm like, this is way too cheesy, too corny. The graphics are just, I mean, it's in the 60s basically was when the series was going on. It's just, I can't stand it. I can't. I'm too modern, I guess, to be enjoying that. So I couldn't make it through it.
So was William Shatner in the original series? And he,
Yeah.
okay.
All the original cast came back for the movies.
Oh, okay.
In the first season of the original series, they had an episode called Space Seed. And I don't want to go all evening, but I will say they find this ship floating in space. There are people on it. They're in like cryogenic freeze or whatever the term would be. They unthaw them. Khan is one of them. He's the leader. He's genetically modified. They find out then that the eugenics wars of like the 1990s. I'm not reading this. He basically took over the Earth. And when he was captured and he and like 72 of his followers were frozen and cast into space on the Botany Bay. So Kirk befriends Khan. Khan seduces like a nurse, Yalman Rand or something like that on the Enterprise. And she helps him take over the ship. Well, eventually Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Mr. Scott, they take it back. They maroon them on City Alpha 6 or 5. I can't remember the details, which is a lush paradise planet. And then 15 years passes and the movie happens. So Khan hates Kirk, and for Kirk, Khan is less than an afterthought.
So my initial impressions of Khan, seeing him, and I was familiar with the storyline because I watched the J.J. Abrams version of Star Trek II Into Darkness, and so Khan is
that's not a good rendition of the story.
Right. But at least I was familiar with the names, and I think that he was chronologically frozen in that one too, right? So I was familiar at least with that part. But here, he basically looked like, and I think it's because I think this was aired in the early 80s or either late 70s or early 1982. I think it's because of the time period. They made Khan basically look like He-Man.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's amazing, number one. Like, it's such a period piece that he looks like He-Man.
Well, Ricardo Montalban, was on Fantasy Island at the time. This is what kind of a nerd I am. I know all that background. And he'd been working out like a fiend. He maintained forever that was his body all bulked up. There's always the rumor that's floated around that he was wearing a prosthetic chest to make him look so muscular. And I don't know what's true or what's not, but he certainly chewed the scenery.
Yeah.
I will say, like, I did like the out of the two we watched, this is definitely the best one of the two that we, and like honestly, compared to most like Star Trek versus Star Wars, this has a lot more of a stronger storyline than most of the Star Wars films I've seen.
Oh yeah. Well, I always say this about Star Trek versus Star Wars. Star Wars is strictly space fantasy. It's a long time ago. It's a galaxy far, far away. Earth is not in it. It's not Earth-based. It doesn't obey the same laws of physics. Star Trek is supposed to be pure science fiction. Like it's our future. It could happen. It's based in our reality. So I never feel like that's a fair comparison. I mean, I know people that hate Star Trek and love Star Wars and vice versa. And I like Star Wars better than Star Trek myself, but I appreciate Star Trek for what it is.
Right.
I'm sorry. I feel like I'm dominating the conversation.
For this movie was very interesting. Like one of the themes that was growing old, logic versus emotion, death, and of course friendship, which is also I would say is also a theme for the third one. But like death is really like a theme throughout, especially like I guess Kirk coming to grips with it finally, because I guess he kind of cheated the that test thing or whatever. So I guess he never felt like he got to embrace death or whatever, something like that.
See, when they were filming the movie, the rumors got out. There were spoilers even in those days that Spock was going to die. So that whole scene at the beginning where it's a simulation, but the whole crew dies, and then it comes out, oh, they're not really dead. The audience is then shocked at the end of the movie. Well, I mean, it's been out for 40 years, so it's not a spoiler when Spock actually dies.
Yeah.
I mean, my uncle is a diehard Star Trek fan, and growing up, he would tell me when Spock died in the theater, it was all I could do to hold it together. Because it's the first real death in Star Trek of a character that we love.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was reading a little bit about the history into Leonard Nimoy coming back, playing Spock for this movie. Apparently there was some pushback from him. He didn't really want to come back. And I don't know, did he write a book or he wrote something about I am not Spock.
And then in his later years.
And there was a lot of
in his later years, after he kind of came back around on the whole Star Trek thing, he wrote another book called I Am Spock. Because
that's
he
amazing.
at one time, all of the Star Trek actors, Nimoy, Shatner, DeForest Kelley, all of them, they went through a time. See, Star Trek went off the air in 1968, and that's all they were known for is Star Trek. All these fan conventions started sprouting up in the 70s, and that's all they were, and they wanted to be actors. So then 1979 comes, Star Trek the Motion Picture, and it's not great in my opinion, but it is worth watching one time. And then they made Star Trek 2, which was a huge hit. And suddenly they're in demand again, still a Star Trek. And so there's a lot of pushback from them. They want to actually be considered actors, and then they're considered these characters. And that's why you had that.
I will say, like, William Shatner's acting wasn't as bad as because I know everybody makes fun of him for like having like this whole choppy.
He's very melodramatic.
Yeah, but in here, I feel like he was pretty tame as an actor. You know,
I liked his acting actually. There wasn't a lot about the movies that I liked per se, but I did like his acting. So, but it may be because I've seen so many comedy bits of people impersonating him that it was relatable. I was like, okay, it's kind of funny, but it's not as bad as everybody exaggerates it to be. Like it's pretty decent.
It's hard to go back 40 years later and judge a movie 40 years old by today's standards.
That's true. That is true. And that's what kept me going here, because I felt like a lot of my complaints about these two movies was just because of the time period it was. The story is fine. The story's really good, actually, in both movies, I thought. But it's just the period that it was, the acting style, I think the production style. You know, your graphics is still 80s. You know, it's not that great.
And it's early 80s.
It's early 80s. And I've noticed you don't have a lot of soundtrack. A lot of you have a little bit, but every scene is not filled with music in the background like it is today. And I noticed, so it creates a lot of quiet moments, a lot of dead space. And there's so much talking in Star Trek that it felt quiet to me. It's like, this is just a lot of people talking, you know, and it's a complete contrast as to what Star Trek is today.
Right.
Like Star Trek today, I feel like is basically just Star Wars because it's full of action in almost every scene. Now, what I like about Star Trek in general, just as a whole here, is I feel like it's more relatable. Number one, like Nate, you were pointing out. Number two, they dive into a lot of modern day politics in all of the series that they've done. And
I would argue that the Star Trek series are better than the Star Trek movies. The movies are supplemental. The series, I watched Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and they, in 42 minutes of 150 episodes, they can tackle these subjects where in a 2-hour movie on the big screen they can't. Yeah. Star Trek is not action. It's a lot of philosophical talk.
If you even look at like the cast, they're very diverse for its time, I guess.
Absolutely.
That kind of surprised me.
Even go back to the series in the 60s, very diverse for its time. So they're known for that, and I love it. I love that they were progressive in Hollywood. Here's another, I guess, fun fact about I don't know if she was a writer or the producer of the original series, Lucille Ball.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and I'm guessing until I don't know when she passed away, but at least in the original series, she was involved in it, either a producer or a writer or something. So, and I love that because think of her coming up as in acting, being a female, and getting such high roles in Hollywood at the time. It's amazing. It's amazing to me.
I agree.
And this is like something I didn't know, but like I didn't know James Horton did the music for the movie.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
So I like the Star Trek theme music. I have in every show and movie. I just think it's a hopeful, futuristic, pointing you towards the utopia that we're seeking sound.
Yeah,
I agree. I honestly think that the theme song for probably every Star Trek series that I've and movie that I've heard thus far may be better than Star Wars music.
Oh, I got to think about that.
I find it more calming and more hopeful, maybe the right word, like you said. Although I will say that Luke's
epic, like it's scaled down on the epic sound.
It is less epic. It's more it's more somber, But Luke's theme in Star Wars is one of the best that there is. It exists, period.
And I might argue that the Imperial March is in the top 4 or 5 movie score
I would agree.
sounds ever. I mean, when I hear the Imperial March, I'm like, oh, here we go. What's happening now?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's solid writing. John Williams, we can talk about that another night.
Yeah.
Or another day.
We're getting the movie scores conversation whether we want it or not.
Well, because a movie score adds so much to your film going experience.
It does.
I mean, if you watch a movie in silence and you watch it with the score, your reaction is viscerally different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to speak in sound bites, so we can clip it.
Completely agree. So going back to the Kobayashi Maru, was this the first time that it was revealed that he cheated to defeat that?
Well, we gotta remember when the series happened, it was not a serial. It was an episode a week. And there was very little in the original series that would carry from episode to episode to season. And you got some backstory, but shows back then didn't, Star Trek was pitched as Wagon Train to the Stars. So, it's just 45 minutes to kill. Well, then we know there's a lot going on that we don't see. The series ends 12 years later. The next movie comes out. The first movie comes out. There's all this stuff that they allude to happening. You never really get it. Kobayashi Maru didn't come around until Star Trek II that he cheated. It wasn't even mentioned.
Oh, wow.
And then it comes back around in the J.J. Abrams movies.
See, that shows how different, like, we're used to television now. Like, whenever there's like a movie or some type of like event that happens after a series, you're so used to a series building up and not being just episodic every week.
Shows today are largely not week by week. They're season by season, story by story.
Yep.
Excuse me.
That's fair. So one thing I like.
I had a theme.
Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah.
So I had another theme, but I guess this doesn't really count now because. So would Khan be genetic engineering gone wrong, or
he was? The story comes out, I think maybe in some of the other material, like the writings and stuff. You can Star Trek and Star Wars have a big expanded universe, right. But he was a part of the eugenics, so he was genetically modified, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
Also funny that the guy who played Khan is an Indian name, played by, wasn't Ricardo Montalban an English actor?
I don't.
He wasn't.
I think maybe the first time I actually saw him in a movie.
He wasn't an Indian. Well, just like in the remake, Benedict Cumberbatch, who is British, plays Khan. That's so there's some cultural misappropriation. Then they want to play it off as, well, it's the future, so it's not as serious. But it would be more controversial today than it was in the 1960s or 1982.
Yeah,
that's a good point. It would.
But he was genetically modified.
Okay,
I didn't take any notes. I can't believe I'm remembering some of this stuff.
I took notes because I knew I wouldn't.
Says a lot about what a nerd I am.
What I liked about specifically Wrath of Khan is the Genesis device storyline.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Number one, just the idea that they've created this technology to basically restore life from nothing. That is so biblical.
Yeah. Oh, and it's alluded to.
Oh yeah, he at the beginning Spock mentions that it's in the Bible. He's like, what I think they were talking about what the Genesis Project is, and he's like, well, other than the biblical reference, I don't know anything about it or something. And I was like, that's amazing that this is a plot point in this story.
Again, 40 years ago, the Bible wasn't as controversial in mass media as it is now. Thank goodness.
Right. Agreed. So I enjoyed that.
Well, and you have to think too, the backstory there of Genesis versus the crew of the Enterprise getting older, the ship being in the third movie being told it's going to be decommissioned. The death of their careers opposite this new life. I mean, there's a lot going on. You could talk about it for days if you wanted to.
Yeah. A lot of life and death dynamic in this movie.
And Admiral Kirk regretting leaving the captain's chair to become an admiral.
Yep.
Having to face his own mortality, needing the glasses. That speaks to a lot of us. I'm older than both of you guys. I'm in my 40s. I've thought about when I've had some health issues. I don't want to get into that tonight over the years. But I've thought about my mortality a lot in my 30s and early 40s, and I never did in my 20s.
Yep.
That does come for all of us.
Yep.
Let me just bring us all down there. Let me be real somber and morose. There we go.
Yeah. Spoilers, we are all going to die.
Yeah.
Okay.
None of us get out of here alive, folks.
That's right.
The Grim Reaper's undefeated. Well, maybe one.
This is a very hopeful, amazing podcast thus far. Explosive diarrhea into death. And so...
Yeah. So good night, folks.
So with the Genesis Project in the movie, like, was it because of I may have overheard this, but was it because of lack of resources, maybe overpopulation or something like that? Is that why they're trying to create life again, or is it?
Yeah, because at one point Carol Marcus says there'll be no more hunger anywhere. Because at that point, Earth is part of Starfleet. It's part of the United Federation of Planets. I'm going to mute myself for a moment.
So this has been fun.
Have an intermission.
Okay, so she quit barking. Part of the United Federation of Planets. So that's not just Earth. It's Earth, Vulcan, and thousands of other star systems. And Earth, because it's taken from Earth's perspective, is trying to be like the United States is most of the time and be big brother to the universe. And I understand that analogy, that allegory. So when they talk about hunger, it's supposed to hit close to home.
Right.
This will solve the problem. We have the technology. And I think that's a beautiful part of the story.
Yeah. I mean, this was compared to the other movie, this went a lot deeper with themes and stuff like that. And I think this is why it's regarded as one of the better of the movies. I mean, from what I've been reading. And I mean, I will say, if I ever have to go back and rewatch another one, it would be this one for sure.
Oh, yeah. The old joke about Star Trek movies is the even numbered movies are really good. The odd numbered movies aren't as good. And, 1, 3, 5, 7. I mean, I like them all.
And I will say, the quiet parts didn't bother me as much, because I've watched horror movies that are very atmospherically crazy, like The Witch being one. So that stuff doesn't bother me, but I get why it can be a little weird to have just these silent moments and not music behind it. So I mean, it is a change in how movies are looked at from I guess an editing standpoint too.
So here's a question. So the young male scientist in this turned out to be Kirk's son, right? So was that a storyline in the series, or was that just something
Carol Marcus was one of those characters that when they mention her, they all look at Admiral Kirk. Oh, it's her, but the viewer doesn't. It's just one of those things you accept happened off screen, which I appreciate.
Yeah,
I appreciate that the understanding is, hey, you don't see everything.
Right.
And even in the movie, in a TV show, that would be drug out for 5, 10, 12 episodes a season or two. Jim, he's your son. and the dramatic music would play and the episode would end. But in the movie, it's over the course of a day, basically. He's yours. And he even says, why didn't you tell me? It alludes to the fact that he wouldn't have been a good father. We never really find out if he would have been or not. But they're totally new characters for this movie. And there's a lot told in 2 hours.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot packed in, I think, to a 2-hour runtime.
And also for it to be like in the, you said early 80s, like for it to be a 2-hour movie, that's probably is a big deal. Because now it's like 2 hours is nothing for most blockbusters. It's like, like if it's anything less than, it's like, it's not acceptable. Not really, but
I agree.
Yeah.
It's like you have to go 2 hours and 15 minutes to be considered a real movie.
Yeah.
2.5, 2:45. I don't know about anybody else, but after about 2 hours and 20 minutes, I'm ready to get up.
Yeah. Sometimes I prefer a 90-minute movie. Sometimes, like every once in a while, it's like
sometimes it's appropriate.
Yeah.
I was telling, I guess you guys before we started tonight. I appreciate that this movie, it's like Moby Dick. Khan is Ahab. Kirk is the whale. And it's even, you see the book on the shelf when they go to the planet. It's very obvious Moby Dick. Well, Star Trek 8, which is First Contact, Captain Picard is Ahab. And the Borg are the whale. And it's even alluded to in that movie. I mean, that's the way I see them both. But I love that kind of stuff.
I really enjoyed that, for all intents and purposes, Khan, he won the situation. He got the Genesis device.
Right.
And he could not let his feud with Kirk go. The bloodlust he had was his downfall.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, he could have done anything he wanted.
Yeah. So
he won. The bad guy won.
Yeah.
He lost his life, but he ultimately won.
Yeah.
I also like that Kirk and Khan never share any screen time. They're never on the same. They're never in the same shot. Because they never meet face to face. How often does that happen? In a movie today, they have a battle.
Right.
They have a fist fight.
So speaking of fist fight, what I love about the two movies that I watched, and I know this is kind of the Star Trek series thing, is the fight scenes. They are so cheesy and just, you can tell that it's fake fighting type thing. Yeah. And I love it. It's just so good.
I agree. I know we want to talk about, or I do, the end of Star Trek 2, where Spock dies.
Yep.
I've seen the movie probably 24 times in my life. And every time when Spock looks at Kirk and asks him how he likes his solution to the unwinnable situation, wants to know if the ship is out of danger, says that the good of the many outweighs the goods of the few or the one. Man, I am struggling to hold it together. Of course, now I'm a Star Trek fan, I guess, more than you guys.
Right.
But I'm watching it and I'm like, I can't take this. I got to walk around, And then at the funeral, when Shatner says of all the souls he's encountered, this one is the most, and he kind of catches in his throat, human. You're like, that's it. I'm done. I have to walk. I have to go out. I have to walk the dog. It's time to go outside.
Yep.
I'm choked all the pieces.
So many shows parody that or reference that to a point where it's like I was expecting it to happen, but it's like, but I couldn't imagine seeing it for the first time. Like I can.
Well, for Star Trek fans, that was major because they lost the show unexpectedly after 3 seasons. It comes back in 1979 in the motion picture. There's a sequel in 82 that looks amazing. And then they killed stinking Spock. I mean, one of the most, if not the most beloved character, the top 1 or 2. And the fans, I mean, I was 4 years old. I clearly did not watch it in theaters. The fans are devastated that he's gone. And I mean, we forget that looking backwards. It doesn't mean this. It's like when Han Solo died in Star Wars: The Force Awakens. It was a shock, and even it wasn't as emotional.
Yeah, honestly, nowadays, I don't know that TV series and movies, when they kill off a main character, it's very shocking anymore because every TV series does it. since Game of Thrones, I mean, Game of
Yeah,
Thrones
man.
became very popular for doing that in season 1,
Yep.
but now everybody does it. It's like you can just expect it.
I mean,
But it's really it's the last 10 or 12 years.
Yeah, it is.
I say the last TV show that I watched where they kill off like a very like iconic character. I mean, it was towards the end, and that was Breaking Bad when they kill off the brother-in-law. I was like
in the episode before the last one,
yeah. And I was like, what? And it's just like,
yeah.
I never really have had that like shock value because like it seems like that was sort of a thing, like kill off this character to surprise people. Walking Dead did it. Game of Thrones did it. It's like, man.
Lost killed all kinds of characters.
Yeah.
So here's a question: Wrath of Khan. What was the reasoning? I'm trying to remember because again, like I was half paying attention because I was bored in this. And what was the reasoning that Captain Kirk chose to send Spock's body to Genesis versus taking him home? Like, what was the reasoning that the movie revealed?
I feel like to this day, Star Trek 3 was not a thought when they filmed Star Trek 2. So it was like a burial at sea.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way that I look at it now. Is if somebody died on a sea voyage, you didn't take them back. You buried them at sea. And this was the same thing. And if I'm remembering correctly, it wasn't supposed to land on Genesis. It was supposed to burn on entry. If I'm remembering correctly. So when the coffin lands on the planet, he comes back to life. He's reborn.
Right.
I'm not spoiling anything again. Yeah. It was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That's the way that I take it.
Yeah. That takes us into the search for Spock. So that's probably a good
transition
segue.
Guy. What can I tell you?
There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and read the synopsis to that one, and then we will jump into Search for Spock. Admiral James T. Kirk defeats Khan, and the creation of the Genesis planet are empty victories. Spock is dead, and McCoy is inexplicably being driven insane. An unexpected visit from Sarek, Spock's father, provides a startling revelation. McCoy is harboring Spock's living essence, Contra, I believe is what they call it, with one friend alive and one not, but both in pain. Kirk attempts to help his friends by stealing the Enterprise and defying Starfleet's Genesis planet quarantine, but the Klingons have also learned of Genesis and race to meet Kirk in a deadly rendezvous. All right, so that's where we are in the search for Spock.
And before we get too deep into it, I will say I was surprised with the cast in this. I didn't know Christopher Lloyd was in this.
Yeah.
Kirstie Alley.
Kirstie Alley. Yeah, I didn't realize she was.
She wasn't in the third one. She's in the second one.
And then the guy who plays.
That's right. That's right.
He played in Blank Check and The Stand and all that. I forget his name, but he always plays bad guys or something. But he plays one of the computer guys in.
Yeah.
So I was like, really?
Yeah, there was a lot of what I considered older actors when we were growing up in the 90s. Like they were already older at that point.
Yeah.
That they were young and they were in these, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. All right, so where do we want to get started with this?
I was thinking.
I really like Star Trek 3 for a couple of reasons.
Okay.
I think it's a linear sequel. It's a linear next chapter from the second movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this one went off on Friday. Well, on Monday, here's the next chapter of our story. It's immediate. It almost
seemed like they could have shot it back to back the way
and they didn't. But you're right. I also like the fact that Leonard Nimoy only agreed to come back at the end if he was allowed to direct the movie.
Yeah.
I
thought that was
cool.
Oh
yeah, he directed Star Trek 3 and 4, which are both good. Shatner directed Star Trek 5, which I would classify as not good.
Okay.
I mean, I watch it. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's not great. But I like that if you watch Star Trek 2, Star Trek 3, you get a good picture of the cast, of the crew and their relationship.
Yep.
So does the Genesis arc continue on after this, or does it like?
It's really over at the end of the third movie. In the fourth one, Earth is attacked by an alien probe. They can't get back to Earth. So they go back in time to rescue, this is no joke, humpback whales that are extinct in the 22nd century. this probe is trying to communicate with whales. It's a very science fiction thing, but it's also people out of time in the 80s in San Francisco.
Right.
So they save the whales, they go back to the future, they save the Earth, and then they're put on trial for stealing the Enterprise. Because you saved the world, but you broke the rules. So, eventually they're all cleared of charges. Kirk is removed from being an admiral back to a captain. So 2, 3, 4 are one story, even though Genesis is only in the first 2/3 of it.
Okay.
That's one thing that I really like about Kirk's character, and really I guess the main cast in general, mostly Kirk's character, is that he is more than willing to break whatever laws and whatever rules he needs to for the greater good.
Or
whatever the moral thing is,
what he thinks the greater good is.
What he thinks the greater good is. Correct.
I always argue that Kirk was not a great captain. Kirk was all about him and his crew. Picard is my favorite. Again, this is not the debate. I always think Picard and Captain Sisko from Deep Space Nine are true captains because they put the greater good above their personal good.
Yeah. So does the original series or any of the movies really go into the history of Pike, of Captain Pike?
No, in the original series, Pike is in the wheelchair and he can't talk. And there are flashbacks to him as the active captain. I think that's the cage in the original series. I can't believe I pulled that out of nowhere. Pike is one that he never gets a lot of attention in the original line.
I'm really looking forward to Star Trek Strange New World. That is Pike's series, and I'm looking forward to that. I think it's going to be good.
So Pike is one of those legendary captains that you don't meet much. Sorry, Josh.
So with the newer movies with the guy that I forget who played Captain Kirk in the new ones. So are they pretty close to these characters, or do they kind of exaggerate? Because I remember in the first kind of reboot, remake, whatever, Kirk was kind of almost like Iron Man, playboy, superstar type of guy. Was he like that in the series, or do they just kind of
Kirk is a playboy in the original series. He doesn't have a girl in every town. He has a girl on every planet. For real. What I appreciated about I call it the J.J. Abrams timeline, is he honored the original. It all happened. Then they went back in time and they fractured it. So everything that you saw happened, but because of this fracture, here's what it looks like now.
Yep.
So Kirk is largely the same. Spock is largely the same. McCoy, Uhura, Montgomery Scott, all those guys are largely the same, but there are subtle differences because they didn't have the same experiences. It's like if a butterfly flaps its wings in Asia, what does it look like in Virginia tomorrow? That kind of thing, butterfly effect. So they're worth watching. You can watch every movie chronologically, 1 through 13, or 12, however many there are. 13. And never be like, well, this is not how it happened, because it's a logical story. And I guess that's okay.
I definitely appreciate that about the J.J. Abrams timeline, that it's a direct tie-in.
I hate reboots when it throws out all the established continuity. I love continuity.
Agreed. And I guess that's what I kind of dislike about what Disney did with Star Wars. They threw out a lot of continuity in terms of the books, I guess. Like all of the on-screen films is canon, but
or it
was.
See, now they're saying 7, 8, and 9 might be cast out.
That's true. I forgot.
So who knows?
That's
Disney
true.
doesn't understand Star Wars.
No,
Disney does not understand Star Wars. I will stake my claim on it. I would argue it in court. They do not understand how to make Star Wars work, except on TV because they have Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau. That's another podcast for another day.
Yeah, but what I really like is in the Picard series, it is still the original timeline.
Right.
It is not J.J. Abrams' timeline. It is the original timeline. I love that.
Right.
You're getting best of both worlds. And I've heard that they are still planning on making another J.J. Abrams
what they're saying.
Timeline movie. So yeah, give us both. If Marvel Multiverse has taught us anything, you can give us all that you want in any universe, and we're fine.
If you plan it right, the fans will believe anything. The fans will buy in if you give them anything logical. The fans don't buy into, I'm going to pick on the Halloween franchise. Well, the first movie happened, the second movie happened, the third movie didn't happen, the fifth movie happened, the seventh, while fans are intelligent, nobody wants to have to do an algebra problem to watch a 2-hour movie.
Yep.
Nobody wants to have to do calculus.
Like continuity is so important because, like, I mean, unless you have a sequel that is so terrible, like you have to retcon it. But like,
and even then, you can get around it.
Yeah.
Say it's a dream in the opening scene of the next movie. I can't believe I dreamed that.
Or break a fourth wall. Like, we're just going to forget that. I mean, Deadpool can do that, I guess. Like,
fans want an excuse to buy in. Give them one. Give them an excuse. Again, I'm getting way off topic.
That's good. It's good. A lot to talk about here.
Yeah.
So getting back on into Search of Spock, what I like about this movie is, once again, it proves humanity corrupts things, and you learned that the Kirk's son basically cheated,
right?
To he used something illegal to get this Genesis project to work, right? And it turned out to be a disaster. It made it unstable, and now it doomed that planet. So that planet is destroying itself now. And I thought that was a meta narrative of humanity, that we are always doing that. There was this good creation, and we just went and mucked it up.
Well, he even said we were years away from perfecting it. Not that we couldn't, but we weren't patient enough. If that's not telling about the human race, I don't know what is.
That's right.
And if you look like time-wise, like if it's not done in like a year or so, it's like, oh my god, this is forever. But like, but if you actually think about like, on a bigger, wide scale, like a couple years, I mean, that's nothing compared to like, in the long scheme of things. And another thing I realized with this movie is like, let me get my notes here. Like, the creation of life, like that, like it's all very biblical. Like this this movie is like, I say the third one is very biblical versus the other one. And I wasn't expecting that.
I mean, you actually get to see a lot of the spawning of new life, and you get to see Spock back alive. I mean, in a new form. He's got a new body. It's a new creation, and that's very biblical. And you get to see Kid Spock, which I think was great to actually get to see Kid Spock.
Agreed.
And and then he basically evolved within minutes and days to a full human. I mean, they had to do that for the movie purpose to get Leonard Nimoy back into character.
I like how they played it off in the context of the movie, though. The planet was aging so fast. Everything on the planet was evolving. I thought that was look, I know why, but I thought that was clever.
It was a brilliant way to do it. It really was.
And listen, I love Doc Brown as the villain.
Agreed. He
was over the top. He was hamming it up. But Christopher Lloyd, we forget that dude is not just Emmett Brown. Yep. He's an actor. I know it was cheesy. It's a sci-fi villain. But if you didn't hate that guy for killing Kirk's son, you don't have feelings. Yeah. If you don't hate him when you see the Enterprise, well, I got to talk about the Enterprise in a minute. But I mean, he's a villain, and he was great.
Which surprised me because I'm always used to Christopher Lloyd playing like the kind of like the goofy guy, good guy, whatever. Because like, didn't he play in aside
he was in Taxi?
Yeah,
He was also Fester Adams in the Addams Family movies.
Oh yeah,
right.
And nailed it. Like he was a perfect Fester.
Yeah, those are great movies. They hold up.
Yep.
Go lay down.
Absolutely. So I concur. He is a brilliant actor. He's one of my favorite actors for sure.
And he's so likable.
Remember made up languages like that? That has to be. I mean, unless he's literally just ad-libbing it, but like.
You're talking the Klingon? Yeah, you can learn it.
Klingon's a real language. I've always wanted to learn it.
Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, as a pastor, I should learn Greek or Hebrew, but I'm like, what how hard it would be to learn Klingon?
What you should do is learn Klingon and say something biblical on Sunday morning in Klingon.
And tell them it's Hebrew. Yeah, they are both guttural. They are both guttural and a lot of film.
Klingon.
Somebody come up and slap you.
Well, in one of the later Star Trek movies, the Klingons are villains. They're real arrogant, and one of them quotes Shakespeare and tells Captain Kirk, he says, you don't appreciate Shakespeare until you've heard it in the original Klingon. And they just leave it hanging. Like he like that's the big joke. It's very well done.
Yeah, agreed. Something about the Vulcan that planet's Vulcan, Spock's race.
Spock's mother is actually human.
That's right. Spock's mother is human, and his father is Vulcan, right?
Full-blooded Vulcan.
Yeah. What I appreciate about the Vulcan is they're logical creatures in their thinking, but they also have this spirituality about them. Mm-hmm. They believe in this eternal essence. Mm-hmm. And you would think that somebody who is just completely logical, or at least in modern thinking, if you're logical, if you're science-based or whatever, you can't believe in a higher power. But that's not what Vulcan is. Vulcan is completely logical, completely science, and have that higher power. Love it. I just love it.
At least it's alluded to.
Yeah.
The Vulcans, it comes out, I don't think as much in the original series as in the Next Generation timeline, or those shows, that the Vulcans really are very emotional, but they're taught, they teach from an early age to suppress your emotions, to let logic rule. And there's probably a debate there that we could get into about what's proper and what's best.
So is the whole logic versus emotions, I mean, is it like that throughout the series, or is it just like for these particular movies?
There's another race called the Romulans. They look exactly like the Vulcans, and genetically they're like cousins.
Aren't they cousins? I believe they're cousins.
And the Romulans embraced emotion, and they're very calculating. They're very ego-driven. The Vulcans address science and logic. Excuse me, bumping into the mic. So they're very calculating, but with exploration instead of conquest. Mm-hmm. And there's always conflict between the two. And in fact, in Star Trek The Next Generation, Spock wants to work with the Romulans to unify the two races again. And I mean, that's a minor plot point now, but later on, it's fun to talk about.
Interesting. And isn't the big plot point in Picard that when the black hole basically destroyed the Romulan planet, the Federation chose to not save them? Or
that's in the J.J. Abrams verse. That hasn't happened in the Picard verse yet, I don't think, has it?
I thought that was the major.
It may be. I haven't watched Picard all the way through.
Okay.
But I'm going
that
to.
Was one of the major storylines. Maybe it was.
A good friend of mine gave me access to his Paramount Plus account. So I'm going to watch Discovery and Picard very soon. And that good friend will remain anonymous, but he's on screen. So well, come and get us, Paramount Plus.
Yeah, that good friend says you're welcome. So, I mean, ultimately, I liked The Search for Spock better than the other one, probably because of the biblical references. It really didn't have a lot to do with the story or the acting. I felt like they were all the same in both. It was more about the biblical references here that I liked.
One of my favorite parts, and again, because I'm really a Star Trek fan. I'm okay with that. When they make the decision to destroy the Enterprise, because the Enterprise itself in Star Trek is a character. Mm-hmm. It's home. It's where they live. It's where all of the shows take place. At least Star Trek, the movies, Star Trek: The Next Generation take place on the Enterprise. It's a character in and of itself. Mm-hmm. Like when you watch, for example, The West Wing, the White House is a character. It doesn't speak. It doesn't have emotions, but it's background and it's setting. So when they destroy the Enterprise and you see it falling across the screen, the fans are emotional. The cast is emotional. The characters are devastated. And even Kirk, you heard him say, "What have I done? I've destroyed the only thing that brought us together." And McCoy, the doctor, says, "What you always do, you've given hope out of hopelessness," which again, biblical.
Yep.
It's more, but it's so emotional to watch the Enterprise be destroyed. You're like, no.
It's interesting, in Wrath of Khan, Spock had to be the sacrifice to save everyone. In this one, it was the Enterprise that was the sacrifice.
Right.
And you're right. It is as big of a character as anybody in Star Trek. I would go as far as to say, even though I'm clearly more of a Star Wars fan, I think the Star Trek Enterprise is a better ship and a better plot device than anything in Star Wars. Like I would prefer, if I had my choice, you had Millennium Falcon over here, which I think is almost the equivalent in Star Wars. So you have the Millennium Falcon.
It was home.
Right. And the Enterprise. I would choose Enterprise. It's a better looking ship. It's home, as you said, and I love the look of it. I would love to have a model of it.
Oh, and they make them. They're nice. I think it's a hard comparison because the Enterprise is designed for exploration. They're not designed for war, although they can fight.
Yeah.
The Millennium Falcon, which I agree is the major ship in Star Wars, it's you never get the idea that it's anything more than a bucket of bolts.
You really don't have the environment on the Millennium Falcon isn't really like, you're on the Millennium Falcon, but it definitely doesn't seem like it's a character like you would call the like in Star Trek.
It's like a car. My car doesn't have any character, but my house does because I live in it. And some people would say I have too much character in my house. You can look behind me and see that.
So what I really, enjoyed about Search for Spock is that, they turned the quote on its head. The needs of the many outweighed the needs of the few, or the one. And then Kirk is like the needs of the one outweighed the needs of the many.
Right.
And I just thought that was beautiful. It was so poetic the way that they did that. And that embraces both movies. Like both movies encapsulated those statements. So I love that.
And
you go back, go ahead.
These are the two strongest, I would say, are these the two strongest films of this sort of era? Or because they get really deep in philosophy and all kinds of metaphors and themes and stuff.
A lot of moral messages.
The sixth Star Trek movie is really deep because they're facing retirement. The whole cast the whole Star Enterprise crew is going to retire. So it's up there. And then Star Trek 7 starts bringing the Next Generation cast, and they're hit and miss as far as the movies. I don't know. Every Star Trek movie has its moments. All of them have their strengths. Two to me stands out as, if not the best, no lower than the top two. But see, I love Star Trek 3 almost as much because I think they're companion pieces. They're not a true sequel.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But I think they're all worth watching. But that's for me. I can't tell you guys they're all worth watching.
If I ever have to go back to any of the Star Trek movies, I will go back. I can watch the movies probably more like and pick up the series.
Right.
But I would definitely can rewatch 2 and 3.
And 4 is hilarious. 4 is almost a comedy when they're back in the 80s of San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
There are moments that are stinking hilarious because they're, fish out of water.
And speaking of comedy, I didn't realize, I don't know why I never thought of this. I'm a huge fan of Futurama. I didn't know Zap was based on William Shatner's character.
Oh yeah. Zap Brannigan
I'm an idiot.
James T. Kirk.
That's awesome.
I like Futurama too. I'm glad to know I've got another fan to talk to.
And they call the planet system as dupe or something in Futurama.
Oh yeah.
So here's a question. So in Wrath of Khan, when Spock is the one that sacrifices, he dies. Now in the J.J. Abrams verse, it's the reverse. Kirk is the one that sacrifices and he dies. Well, does he die though? Because he's in the next movie, so he doesn't. What happened? How do they resolve that? I don't remember.
Kirk dies, but McCoy is working on those little fur balls called tribbles.
Yeah,
he figures out if you inject tribble blood into Kirk, he'll come back to life. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. Also, nobody has an emotional attachment to characters after 3 hours of screen time.
Yeah.
Nobody cared if Chris Pine's Captain Kirk died. The reason they cared about Leonard Nimoy's Spock is they had loved that character for over 15 years. So there was there's no emotional resonance to introducing a character and killing them.
Yeah.
especially when you know this is almost a remake of The Wrath of Khan. You know he's not going to stay dead.
And then, you know, it's
let me
kinda
not skewer those movies because I do enjoy them all, but I was not impressed with
when
that.
Kirk dies in the J.J. Abrams version, it's almost like the next sequel just makes that less impactful.
Well, they bring him back before the credits roll.
Yeah, it's like I hate didn't they do that in like the last Star Wars movie? Like Chewie gets blown up, but then like
but he's not really
he's in the ship.
I think they implied that the ship that was getting blown up that he was on, but he wasn't really on that one. It was something. That was the dumbest thing ever.
Listen, anytime you want me to take a 2.5-hour diatribe against Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, I'll watch it and I'll trash every scene. So, it's the worst of all the Star Wars movies. It's worse than The Phantom Menace. It's worse than Attack of the Clones. The acting is terrible. The characters are not likable, and you root for the Empire to win.
Yeah,
set me up.
I agree. I agree with all of that.
My blood pressure. I thought
with the sequel series, Force Awakens, there was so much nostalgia there that I felt like I liked it. But then when I rewatched it, I was like, I don't know that I liked it that much.
It's a New Hope.
It's a New Hope. It's just a remake of New Hope. So then you go on to what was the next one?
Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi. When I watched it the first time, I was like, this is garbage. Like, why would they make these decisions with these characters? But then the second time I watched it, I was like, you know what? I'm okay with this. This is a new direction. This is like basically ending the idea of Jedi being, they almost ended the idea of light and dark side. It was like the gray Jedi. There's really no.
There is that concept in the expanded
there is that exactly. So I thought that that's what they were going to do, and I'm like, you know what? I'm actually open to this idea. I think I'm okay with it. Then they go back and just retcon that. It's
because they didn't have a plan. They brought in these people. They let them do what they wanted, and I'll say it. This is easily the second time, if not the third. Disney does not understand Star Wars. Criticize George Lucas all that you want. He knew where his story was going. He knew how he was going to get there. And I'm not saying he had all 9 movies plotted out, but he knew what he was doing.
I will say the prequel trilogy is a lot more consistent in the story wise.
And The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett make the prequel trilogy even more important.
Yeah.
I'll go to my grave on that one.
And Justin's heard me bitch about this before, but I hate Hayden Christensen as an actor, in the Star Wars series.
So I'm not him as a person, but him as an actor. He's a good actor. I've seen him. I don't know that it's his fault. I really don't. I think it's his script or something. He is a good actor. Watch him in other movies. He's a good actor.
That's right. And the prequel series, there were no sets. It was all digital.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine acting in front of a green screen, sometimes by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, exactly. I don't know.
It had to be hard. He was young too.
Yeah.
When he did that. I'm going to give him benefit of the doubt.
I will watch the prequels any day over any of the sequels.
Agreed. I also think that a better judgment of Hayden Christensen is going to be in the Obi-Wan series.
Yes. I can't wait.
I can't wait to see. I hope they have Anakin scenes. I really do. Do flashbacks or something, because
there's no way he's coming back to not be on screen.
Right. Because they can have anybody in a Vader suit. Right, now, I think that he is doing the Vader parts in the suit. He wanted to be Darth Vader, essentially. So, but I wonder, I assume that they got James Earl Jones to do Vader's voice again, right? Because he's getting really old. They need to get have him say every word in the dictionary. That way we can piece it together or something, because we can't lose that voice.
We're going to pull a South Park chef situation. Just kind of have
yeah, that's right. Speaking of, I don't know if it's related
at all. I told you no more South Park talk.
we ventured into Star Trek. This is why Star Trek's better. We've moved on from Star Trek. This is Star Wars now. This is why Star Wars is better. But going back to Star Trek,
thank you.
I meant to bring up earlier that the friendship, that was displayed between Spock and Kirk, and that's a big storyline throughout the entire, I think, universe of Star Trek. In real life, at least when they got older, they weren't really friends at all. And I read that it was because Shatner was doing like a documentary in the early 2000s, and he wanted Leonard Nimoy to be in it, and for whatever reason, Leonard Nimoy had reservations about it. He said, "No, I don't want to be in it."
Well,
And again, like I don't know what the reason was, but it's perfectly fine, perfectly understandable for someone not to want to be in a documentary, right? So apparently, Shatner goes behind his back, hires somebody to secretly do an interview as a fan or something, and record it. And then he got the clip. He got like the audio clip or something, and he was going to put that in the documentary anyway. And that was the last straw apparently for Nimoy. And then they didn't speak ever again, and they didn't speak until his deathbed, and it didn't then either. Like there's an article that says that Leonard Nimoy died hating Shatner, and
that's probably true. I don't know. I haven't read that.
right. So, and again, I don't know the details. I guess a lot of that's speculation. Now, what Shatner alluded to was basically that they'd have some hard feelings in that documentary, and that they just never spoke again. That it wasn't. He said that it wasn't like I hated him, or that. And he said I don't know that he hated me. We just didn't speak again after that, and then he passed away. So it's very unfortunate that was the conclusion of their friendship.
Right.
Now, I have heard that a lot of people have a problem with William Shatner.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he wanted Star Trek. He wanted to be the star. So he always carried himself like it was not an ensemble. And Star Trek works best when it's an ensemble.
Agreed.
Which the other series have not had a problem with.
Mm-hmm.
So, George Takei hated Shatner for years. James Doohan didn't like him for years. And they've all kind of made their peace as they've all started to get old and die. But, Shatner apparently had a massive ego. Now, I can't speak from personal experience, but that's what the rumors have always been. And I mean, it tracks.
And I mean, I get like, you probably have to play him. If you're a method actor, you probably want to get that ego down for the character, but to carry that like after the script and cameras down, you don't want to carry that.
Right.
With you,
that's how Justin treats this podcast.
That's right.
That's not true at all.
All right, good stuff. I think we have pretty much dissected the two movies. I don't know that we went into every act there was, but you got the gist of our. This is more of a podcast about our feelings towards something, and not really dissecting every scene. It's more about our feelings and our emotions as we go through it.
And I will say, like, I'm still not. I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of the Star Trek, but this definitely. I can probably watch another movie if I, like stick with the movies, because there's no way I can watch the series.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't even think of it. I mean, now I have watched some of the Next Generation, and I will say that I do like it a lot better. What I did is I looked for a list saying like the top 10 Next Generation episodes, and I just watched those. And I'm like, you know what? This is pretty good, So
it started to turn the corner after about the first season of Star Trek Next Generation is not great because they weren't sure who they were.
Yeah.
But there are some episodes of that show that I would put up against anything.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah. And the way Josh feels about Star Trek is the way I feel about South Park. I could watch an episode here or there. I'm never going to be a fan, but I'm not like,
Like, I like that you can still kind of watch the movies and not have to have the entire background of Star Trek going in. Like, I know who these characters are. Yep. I know that it's, I know Spock. I know William Shatner's character. I know the Enterprise. I don't need to go back and watch the shows or anything.
That's the good thing about Star Trek is that it was so popular that I think everybody's familiar with the main cast and the characters in Star Trek.
There are only like 79 episodes of Star Trek. There are like 160 episodes of The Next Generation, 165 episodes of Deep Space Nine, 162 episodes or whatever. But the original characters are still the best known. There's a reason for that.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. All right. Well, thanks, Nate, for coming up with this one for us.
I didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah, completely by accident. But all right, so I guess we need to quickly come up with our next topic for the next episode.
Would it be your turn?
well, I don't know that we have turns here. We had the list. Nate, do you still have a list on hand?
I've got it somewhere
You're
on
the
my
keeper of
desk.
the list, Nate.
You're the
Oh, wait, I
keeper
have
of the
pictures
list.
of it. Wait a minute. I sent you the pictures. I do have it. I take it all back. Oh, goodness. When would that have been? All
So,
right.
yeah,
Let's see here.
I have Stacy's list. I have Josh's list. I have my list. And I have an overall list where we talked about South Park, Spider-Man No Way Home, Lord of the Rings, movie scores, 80s horror, Batman on film. That was kind of composite.
Mm-hmm.
And then Josh had like the Halloween movies, Clerks.
I say let's remove Lord of the Rings because like I was thinking about that over the weekend and I'm like,
Can't do it.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
To do it.
That's a
You
season.
need to do like a chapter at a time. It would take literally 6 episodes.
Literally
Yeah.
6 episodes. Yeah.
Hey, there's me. Stuff on Justin's list was like Power Rangers, Arnold, Jetson and Flintstones, Loki, Hawkeye, Fringe. I'm missing something.
A lot of minor seasons as well.
Josh is like Halloween, Clerks, The Thing, Training Day, Infinity War,
The Thing,
Matrix.
Yeah.
What about The Thing?
The Thing. I love
Surely I can find it somewhere to watch it.
It should be on.
It should be on one of the streaming. It may be on Paramount Plus. Who knows? Or Amazon Prime. But
that movie has some of the best practical effects in any film of that time.
There was a reboot. There was a recent reboot of that, right?
Yeah, but I haven't seen it. I think it was.
I don't think I've seen it either.
I could be wrong, but I don't think it was.
Was it a prequel?
Reboot.
I think it's a prequel.
Yeah.
Where can I stream The Thing? You can stream the. I'm looking. I'm sorry, it's taking me a minute.
Oh no, you good?
No, you're good.
Tubi,
it's
Prime
crazy
Video, iTunes.
Tubi TV is free.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, it's free. It just has commercials between scenes, and it's all.
I don't mind ads.
Yeah.
All right. So if everyone's in agreement, I think that would be a great one to jump into next. Is The Thing.
I don't remember ever watching it, so I'm excited. I know I have, but I don't remember it.
Okay.
I got
a good movie.
I got the Blu-ray version. It's like I went back and the effects are still good.
There's a board game of The Thing, and I don't own it, but I've played it, and I will say that the concept is really good about having a secret, someone who is basically infested as an alien or whatever, and you're kind of this, you're the hidden villain, and you're trying to corrupt everybody, but they don't know who you are, type thing. But playing it's not great. And I don't know if you ever played it, Josh, but the problem is it took about 3 hours. That is just too long for me to keep entertained in a board game.
We played something like it. It wasn't called The Thing, but it was based on I don't know if it was the book or what, but it was based on the whole story of The Thing, but it wasn't called that. It was
It was something else. It was a generic. They didn't have the IP for it, so they basically had to call it something different.
I'm sorry, fellas, I didn't mean to interrupt, but on Amazon Prime, you rent or buy the movie, which it'll cost. You could rent it for $2.99. I think $3 is not a lot to ask for.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I think Tubi TV is free.
Right. It is. Tubi is free.
So yeah, there's options for us. So yeah, that's what we will plan to do for the next one. I think that'd be really good. Oh, yeah. And as always, I have a closing quote from Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan. So let's end it with this. I have been and always shall be your friend. Live long and prosper.
I can't do it. That's the best I can do.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
Later. Captain's log. Stardate 47634.44. This new venture has taken its toll on the crew. Both Justin and Josh seem to be, to turn a phrase, losing it. I'm not sure exactly just what I've signed on to. These men seem to be obsessed with South Park, and I'm certain there's a plot to convert me to their fandom. I cannot allow it.
Sir, are you awake?
Yes, Mr. Josh. Is there a problem?
Yes, I have a huge problem. 2 4-letter words, hint, is 60 sci-fi sitcom.
Did you seriously interrupt me for a crossword puzzle?
I've been racking my brain around this, and I can't seem to figure it out.
The fact that you don't know it completely disappoints me.
Sorry, sir. Have a good day.
I have officially logged a complaint with the higher up about Josh recording from what appears to be a well-decorated bathroom stall. I'm also very concerned that Justin seems to think Star Wars and Star Trek are the same thing. Further, he is convinced that all others will sing along to a song it appears he just made up. It's fascinating and troubling. Mr. Josh, I told you to leave me be.
Sorry, sir. It's me.
What do you need, Mr. Justin?
I feel really bad about what I've done, and I'll never do it again. So can I please have my lightsaber back?
No. You know those laser swords are not allowed on the bridge, and yet you did it anyway. Now leave me be. I'm trying to complete something.
Fine.
What did you say?
No, nothing, sir. Good night.
My other major concern is this. I'm not really the captain, yet they seem to have accepted me as one. Let's just see how far I can take it. I swear to goodness, this better be important.
Sir, I thought you should know something. Justin has another one of those laser sword things on the bridge, and he's making a mess.
Justin! Justin!
Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast. We hope that we were able to entertain you at least for a spell. If you see value in our craziness and want to continue supporting us, please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos, and share our content with someone you may know. Also, let us know how we're doing. Make suggestions for the podcast. Leave us a comment. Heck, send us an email. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Bottle of Pop Culture podcast.